Hello and thank you for checking out today's video. We just want to remind you that we're still releasing new episodes of our podcast, Into the Killing. You can find it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere you find great podcasts. We also recently launched another channel called Paranormally Listed, where we talk about things like UFO encounters, sightings of monsters, ghosts and hauntings, and other unexplained phenomenon. There's a link to Paranormally Listed in the description box, and we'll also have a link at the end of this video. But just before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, Gin Rummy Stars. You can download now from the link in the description box. When I was younger, whenever my family went camping, we would play Gin Rummy. I always hated camping, but I absolutely loved playing Gin Rummy. So I was super excited to find Gin Rummy Stars, a free to download game. If you've never played Gin Rummy, you should check it out. It's really easy to learn. You're dealt 10 cards, and then you draw cards to make sets of 3 or 4, or runs using the same suit. But be careful when making your sets and runs. Any extra cards you may have at the end of the round are called deadwood, and they count against you. And it's that simple. After a couple of hands you'll get it, and you'll be obsessed with the game just like me. You can play Gin Rummy Stars anytime, anywhere, and you play against people all over the world. Who knows, you may even get a chance to play against me. One thing I really like about the game is the Joker variant, which makes the game a lot more exciting because the Joker is wild. Gin Rummy is a great game because it'll improve your strategic skills, and it'll train your brain. Oh, and finally, you get to make your own avatar. Do you think you're smart enough to win Gin? Download the app now and try to beat me. I love this game, and I'm sure you guys will too. What are you waiting for? Click on the link in the description, download the game for free, and receive 1,000 free coins. Good luck, and I will see you there. Number 3. Lois Nedean Smith. In 1982, 41-year-old Lois Smith lived in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. She went by her middle name, Nedean. In high school, she gained the nickname Mean Nedean because of her short temper, and the nickname stuck with her for the rest of her life. In 1982, she had a job as the assistant supervisor of secretaries and bookkeepers at a local company. She had 4 children and a stepson. Although Nedean was known for her short temper, which got worse when drugs and alcohol were involved, she did not have a criminal record. One person who seemed immune from her temper was her son Greg. In 1982, Greg was 18 years old and he was dealing drugs. Nedean didn't seem to mind that her son was involved in illegal activity. Earlier that year, Greg had been dating a 21-year-old woman named Cindy Bailey. But at some point, they had broken up. At the beginning of July 1982, Greg was dating another young woman, Teresa Baker. Nedean had been hearing rumors that Cindy was going to talk to the police about Greg's drug dealing. She also heard rumors that Nedean was arranging to have Greg killed. Being the protective mother, Nedean decided to get some revenge on the woman who was threatening her son. On the morning of July 4th, 1982, Nedean, Greg, and Greg's current girlfriend, Teresa Baker, went over to the motel where Cindy was staying. Nedean and Greg convinced Cindy that she should come with them for a drive. Before they got out to the parking lot, Teresa told Cindy not to get into the car. But Cindy ignored her and got into the vehicle's back seat with Nedean. Within minutes of getting into the car, Nedean confronted Cindy about the rumors, and she denied it. Nedean then started to strangle Cindy. Then Greg, who was driving, passed his mother a knife. Nedean slowly drove the knife into Cindy's neck near the oral cavity. Nedean directed Greg to drive to his father's home. Nedean and her ex-husband Jim had been divorced for years. He lived in Gaines, Oklahoma. When they got there, Nedean pointed a gun in her ex-husband's face, forced him to get into the bathroom, and told him to stay there. Jim did as he was ordered. Nedean, Greg, and Teresa took Cindy into the living room. Nedean taunted Cindy by pointing the gun at different parts of her body. Cindy would move a pillow in vain attempts to block the bullet. While Cindy was sitting on a recliner, Nedean fired a shot, and the bullet almost hit Cindy in the head. She then fired several shots at Cindy, and this caused Cindy to fall to the floor. Nedean handed the empty gun to Greg, and then he and Teresa left the room to reload it. When they returned, Nedean was standing on Cindy's neck. She then jumped up and down several times on her neck. Greg handed the gun back to his mother and told her to finish her off. Nedean then fired 5 bullets into the body of 21-year-old Cindy Bailey. After killing the young woman, Nedean, Greg, and Teresa left. A short time later, a neighbor came over to Jim Smith's home and found the body. They called the police. Half an hour later, Nedean, Greg, and Teresa were arrested. The medical examiner determined that Cindy had been shot 8 times, 5 in the chest, twice in the head, and once in the back. 5 of the shots would have been fatal. The stab wound to the neck could have been fatal as well. Teresa told the police what happened, and in exchange for immunity, she agreed to testify against the mother and son. Lois Nedean Smith went to trial in December 1982. She was found guilty and she was sentenced to death. Greg Smith went to trial in June 1983. He was also found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. Nedean served 19 years on death row. On December 4, 2001, 61-year-old Lois Nedean Smith was executed via lethal injection. Her last words were, "To the families, I want to say I'm sorry for the pain and loss I've caused you. I ask that you forgive me. You must forgive to be forgiven." Nedean is only one of 17 women who have been executed in the United States since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. Gregory Smith was released on parole in January 2009 after serving 27 years. But a few months later, he was sent back to prison for possession of marijuana. He was released in April 2011 after serving about 2 more years. In September 2013, he stabbed a man in Bozeman, Montana. He was also accused of beating and keeping a woman captive in his hotel room for 2 months. Instead of sending him to trial for those crimes, he was sent back to Oklahoma to keep serving his life sentence. At the time of this video, 57-year-old Gregory Smith is serving a sentence at the Lawton Correctional Facility in Lawton, Oklahoma. Number 2. The Bride of Christ Church. It's believed that Franz Edmund Crefeld was born in Germany around 1873. He came to the United States around 1884. As an adult, he was a member of the Salvation Army for a short time. He then decided to leave the Salvation Army and became a traveling street preacher, trying to attract a following. Franz named his group the Bride of Christ Church, and he called himself Joshua II. In July 1902, Franz was in Portland, Oregon, and he met a woman named Maud Hurt, who would later become his follower and his wife. In late 1902, Franz and his followers settled in Corvallis, Oregon, a town with a population of about 2,500 people. Franz's flock continued to grow in the town, but not everyone was impressed with the church's presence. Many of the townspeople thought that they were a cult, and they called them Holy Rollers because of their frenzied style of worship. At most, the cult had 27 people, and many of them were from one family, the Hurts. Eventually, the cult lived in the Hurts' home. On October 28, 1903, in an act of anti-materialism, Franz had his followers take the Hurts' possessions out to their front yard and set them on fire. The bonfire lasted for 3 days. People in the town began to wonder if Franz was being proper with all the female followers. In January 1904, a group of men tarred and feathered Franz and told him to leave town. The next day, he married Maud Hurt. Franz and his followers then left town. Franz and some of his followers ended up in Portland, Oregon. It was there that Franz had a sexual affair with his wife's aunt, Donna Starr. On March 16, 1904, Donna told her husband, Burgess, about the affair. At the time, adultery was illegal in Oregon, so a warrant was issued for Franz's arrest. But the police couldn't find him. They looked for months, and during that time, many of his followers were committed to asylums. In July 1904, Franz was found in the home of his mother-in-law. He went to trial the next month. Donna Starr testified against him. The jury deliberated for 25 minutes. They found him guilty, and he was sentenced to a maximum of 2 years in prison. He ended up serving 17 months in prison. Upon his release, he started going by the name Elijah. He claimed he was Jesus and he had risen from the dead. By the time he was released, many of his followers had also been released. He told his followers they placed a curse on the Sodoms of Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and Corvallis. A few days after he said he made the curse, on April 18, 1906, there was a massive earthquake in San Francisco. 80% of the city was destroyed and over 3,000 people were killed. The earthquake further convinced Franz's followers that he was the true prophet. One of his most hardcore followers was Esther Mitchell. She was just 15 years old when she joined the cult. She was first cousins with Franz's wife, Maud, and she was the sister of Donna Starr. In the spring of 1906, when Franz was released from prison, Esther returned to the cult. Eventually the cult traveled to Seattle, Washington. Esther's brother, 23-year-old George Mitchell, came looking for her. When he found her, he tried to convince her to come back to Portland with him. But she refused. George was convinced that his sister had been brainwashed. So he went looking for Franz Creffield. He found Franz walking with Maud in the business district. He walked up behind him and shot him in the back of the neck. Franz, who was believed to have been about 26, died within minutes of being shot. Afterward, George lit a cigar and waited for the police. He was arrested, and in custody, he said that he killed Franz for ruining his two sisters. George Mitchell went to trial in July 1906. Several witnesses testified that they saw him shoot Franz. George also admitted that he killed the cult leader, and he explained that he did it because he was protecting the honor of his sisters. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes, and they found him not guilty. On July 12, 1909, the day after George was acquitted, he was at the train station in Seattle, waiting for his train to Portland. With him at the train station were his 3 brothers and his 19-year-old sister, Esther. As he was getting ready to head for his train, Esther pulled out a gun, put it to George's head, and pulled the trigger. 23-year-old George Mitchell died instantly. Esther was arrested and confessed she killed George to avenge the death of Franz. Maud had purchased the gun for her, and they plotted the murder together. So Maud was arrested as well. On November 16, 1906, while awaiting trial, 26-year-old Maud Creffield was found dead in her jail cell. The cause of death was strychnine poisoning. Her death was ruled a suicide. In February 1907, Esther was committed to a psychiatric hospital. She was released in April 1909 and went to live with her parents in Waldport, Oregon. In 1914, Esther got married. A few weeks later, on August 1st, 1914, Esther died by suicide. She had ingested strychnine. She was just 26 years old. Number 1. David Burke. On December 7th, 1987, Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 1771 took off from Los Angeles International Airport at 3:31 PST. It was supposed to land at San Francisco International Airport at 4:43 p.m. It was a daily flight for the airline, and it was rare for something unusual to happen. The plane was a 4-engine British Aerospace 146-200A. That day, there were 39 passengers and 5 crew members on board. About halfway through the flight, a mayday call came from the plane that said there was gunfire on board. At 4:15 p.m., radio contact with the plane was lost. From about 22,000 feet, the plane had taken a nosedive. It had crashed into a hillside on a cow ranch about 15 miles northwest of San Luis Obispo, California. All 43 people on board were killed. Investigators read the passenger list, and one name stuck out to them: David Augustus Burke. Burke was born in May 1952 in Britain to Jamaican parents. During his childhood, he moved to the United States. Around 1972, Burke got a job with U.S. Air in Rochester, New York. He was repeatedly investigated for being part of a drug smuggling ring that brought cocaine from Jamaica to Rochester. Burke had purchased a house in cash, and he supposedly bought a $100,000 Mercedes-Benz in Germany, and he had it shipped to the United States. Burke had also been investigated for auto theft, but the police never found enough evidence to charge him with anything. Burke never got married, but he had 7 children with 4 women. In 1982, Burke transferred to Los Angeles, California. Burke had more problems there, and he often clashed with his supervisor, Raymond Thompson. At one point, Burke was suspended, but it's not clear why he was suspended. He returned to work after a grievance hearing, and he was given back pay for the time he missed. Burke, who was black, accused Thompson, who was white, of being racist when it came time for promotions. Burke felt he had been passed over for 3 promotions in favor of white employees. Also, the rumors of Burke being involved in drug smuggling followed him to Los Angeles. Then, in November 1983, a hidden camera recorded Burke stealing $69 worth of flight cocktail receipts. On November 19, 1983, about 3 weeks before the crash, Burke was fired. He begged for another chance, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. He met with his supervisor, Richard Thompson, several times. The last time they met was on the day of the crash. Thompson had no intention of hiring Burke again. Burke knew that every workday, Thompson flew from Los Angeles to San Francisco, where he resided. Burke had not handed in his credentials, so he bypassed the security, and he brought a .44 caliber Magnum and 6 bullets onto the plane. Then, about midway through the flight, it displayed that 35-year-old David Burke shot 48-year-old Ray Thompson twice. Then the co-pilot, 48-year-old James Nunn, called in to air traffic control to report the gunshots. The investigators reviewed the cockpit voice recorder. They heard the cockpit door open, then one of the flight attendants, 37-year-old Debbie Neal, said, "We have a problem." The 43-year-old captain, Greg Lindemood, asked, "What's the problem?" Then, there was a gunshot. Investigators believe that Burke shot Neal. Then Burke said, "I'm the problem." This was followed by 2 more gunshots. It's assumed they shot Captain Lindemood and the co-pilot, 48-year-old James Nunn. Seconds later, there was another gunshot. It's believed that Burke shot 41-year-old Douglas Arthur. Arthur was a pilot, but he was flying as a passenger on that flight. It's believed he may have been trying to get into the cockpit to make sure the plane didn't crash. Among the wreckage, the police found the Magnum revolver and 6 spent shell casings. They also found a note written on an air sickness bag. It read, "Hi Ray, I think it's sort of ironical that we ended up like this. I asked for some leniency for my family. Remember? Well, I got none, and you'll get none." It's suspected that Burke gave the note to Thompson before he shot him, but anyone who knows for certain is dead. Some people who didn't condone Burke's actions understood his desire to get revenge on his former boss after getting fired. But what is less understood is why David Burke chose to kill 41 innocent people in the process. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now.